A very good evening to everyone, and I welcome you to the What's Editing Anyway interview series, session number 4 today. And Priya Talwar will be in conversation with Aditya Kant, who is Senior Assistant Editor with Times of India, Chandigarh. So, over to you, Priya.
Thank you, Vivek. Thanks, Murugraj again. Thank you everyone for joining me and everyone who's listening. This is, as Vivek mentioned, the fourth episode of What's Editing Anyway. The aim behind the show, which really began with a series of blogs, is to talk about everything to do with editing in a manner that's honest and authentic. Today we have Aditya Kant. Vivek has introduced him already. He's a senior assistant editor with Times of India Chandigarh edition. He's been working as a journalist for 25 years and more, I guess. He started as a reporter and he's gradually moved up the ladder. And last time we had, if you guys were here, last time we had an editor and okay, okay. Last time we had an editor and an author where it was really great to hear an author saying that yes, there is friction between the author and editor, but yes, there are ways to resolve it in a manner that is mutually respectful. Today, I'm very glad and happy to have Aditya, who's been on both sides. And for those of you who've been in journalism in any manner, especially in the editorial, you will know that there is 100% has always been some friction between authors and editors, and we will be touching that today. But let me first thank Aditya for taking the time out and joining us on this show. Thank you so much for coming on this show, and I hope we make a really good time. We have a good time chatting about things.
Pleasure is all mine, Priya. It has been whatever interaction we had. I think we knew it's going to be a good session, and in fact, I was looking forward to it.
Thank you. Okay, so I want to dive in straight. I know I don't want to beat around the bush. You've spoken earlier about two very interesting incidents. One in which you were telling me how the reporter that was making the same mistake again. It was a very specific spelling mistake, but the meaning and the significance of the mistake was huge. How you dealt with it is what you were telling me. Another incident where you told me that the choice of one word which was edited maybe incorrectly, landed up you in trouble with a very senior official from the judiciary. So I don't want to give all the details because those incidents are very interesting. Of course, if you had more, but I still want you to tell us again those two incidents, and then we'll talk about the why of it.
Yeah, Priya, I think we spoke about one of the incidents was when I used to cover courts. It was something related to corruption in the lower judiciary. If I remember, I think one of the judicial officers at the lower rank, he was involved into corruption and he was suspended by the higher court. So I think those were initial days of my reporting, and I was very excited about the news, as it happens with the reporters and all that. I filed my story, and it was a story and in which those were the times when it was for the first time I realized how important it is even for the reporter as well as the deskies to coordinate with each other, and there should be some interaction. So I filed my story, and it was about the suspension of the judicial officer. So next day, in fact, I was also shocked because the person on the desk, I think he was also as new as I think as I was at those times. He wrote in the headline, "District Judge Suspended." So district judge is actually a very loose term, which is used by a layman generally for every judge or every judicial officer who is in the lower court, in the district courts. So whereas district judge, it could be an higher district and session judge is also a very higher post. He is the overall. And we have certain subordinate judges. So it offended a very senior official due to which this entire news clipping was actually referred to the higher judiciary. And because of which some contempt proceedings had to be initiated. So later it got clarified, in fact, because it was a bona fide mistake and everyone, judiciary also understands. But the process through which we had to go through, I think it was quite, in the initial days, it was, in fact, I was also in some kind of panic and there was some restlessness because this was the first time that I was going through this, some kind of this experience and all that. And later we had discussion about it, even with my editor and everything. And at the desk also, that reporter, the deskie who was there, he was also made to realize. But one thing I learned from that particular instance was that it's very important while you are writing your news stories, you should give a tentative headline which makes any sub-editor's job very convenient and easy, because he can understand or she can understand what exactly is the gist of the story or what exactly the reporter wants to write about. So this was one of the incidents which turned out to be a very great experience for me, in the sense that ever since, I think since then, it has been more than 20 years now. Every news report I wrote afterwards, I always used to give one or even two headlines so that there is no doubt with the sub editor. So this was one of the learning experiences for me. And one thing I learned is that it's very important that nowadays, since we are due to lockdown, we are working from homes, it's not very convenient, or it's a bit difficult to interact. Otherwise, whenever you are in the newsroom, I think it's always better to discuss some brief or some gist of your story with the person, whoever is handling your story. So this was one thing which actually I learned hard way, and luckily we got away, because it was a bona fide mistake. And in fact, the judiciary judges also, they understood that it was not intentional. Anyways, we had given a clarification the next day. So, but this was a lesson we learned after which. But one thing,
Before you move,
one thing,
sorry,
yeah.
sorry, go on.
No, no. But the one thing we learned is how important is the interaction between the desk and the reporting. This was the one aspect which actually we learned after that. Both ways, I think communication is the key.
Before you move to the next, I'm sure we'll be talking about how communication is important in depth. But before you move to the second, can you tell me which year was this? Like, you remember? When was this?
Uh, Maybe you want to know how this was. I think somewhere in 2004 or 2005. I
Okay,
think those were the days. I think
great.
internet had not just come in, so working style was quite different. It was not like that everything is happening online. So
So
it was, those were the days. I think
I
it was a
have
different
divided the
period.
conversation just for everyone who is joining just now. So I have divided the conversation into three parts. One is what we're doing now. What you said, just now that, those days were different. The second part is exactly that, then and now, the difference, right? And third is going to be, some very specific questions on just one theme. So I'll take you there when we reach there. But I want to ask you quickly if you can tell us the
Hmm.
second incident that you told me about, this particular reporter and a very specific spelling mistake that you were telling me about.
Yeah, yeah, that was also very interesting. I think there were many incidents. I think that was, I think we had a young reporter who had just now, who was fresh from his diploma in journalism, and he was given the crime beat. So I think there was some, I think it was ahead of Diwali festival. These cops, traffic cops, they carry a lot of drives ahead of these festivals because of that traffic rush and everything. So there was the vehicles were to be towed away from a particular space in Sector 17 in Chandigarh, which is very crowded. So the reporter actually, he wrote a story, of course, without giving a headline, that traffic cops are going to tow away the vehicles. So the spelling was TOE. So he just got confused with TOW and TOE. And it happened that, of course, on desk also we had new people. So the person who was editing that story also gave a headline of TOE, the traffic cops, to tow away the vehicles. And it appeared in the newspaper next day. So we were hauled up by the editor. Those were the days when actually entire paper was scrutinized. Every headline was scrutinized, and mistakes were actually shown to the reporters as well as to the deskies. Nowadays, we don't have that much time, I think, because there's too much pressure about digital media, online updating and everything. So next day, I still remember, I think, and we used to have a good laugh over it, me and my desky friend. So our editor, he took out the text, the news clipping, and from the Oxford University, from the Oxford Dictionary, he took out the exact definition of TOE and the definition and the exact explanation of TOW. And next day, when we reached in the evening at our desk, so those explanations were there, and it was tagged with a pin outside our close to our desk. explaining that this is how, this is the difference between TOE and this is the difference between TOW. So it was for everybody out there. So I think these were some incidents which we actually keep remembering even now. And those were the days when I think everything was taken very seriously, and mistake was, I think, it was considered a big blunder. So I can remember there were a lot many instances, but I think these two were quite apparent, which happened at the earlier stage of our career, and afterwards, actually, we still keep having good laugh over it now.
I'm sure, if I were to prod you or even like any other senior reporter or journalist, they would come up with plenty of incidences that show, if there was a misunderstanding or lack of communication, what then happened. The what then happened might seem very exciting, interesting. Those stories can become even more, like as intense, funny, dangerous, tragic, or whatever. But I wanted to bring in these two incidents. One, of course, you and I have spoken about these, but for the, just to bring in a reference and show how these things are likely to happen. But the point is that these can be avoided, which is why editors come in, which is why we are there to, to do that filtering so that that doesn't happen eventually. Slowly, it, filters into the maybe the mind of the author. Gradually, he or she understands, oh, this is the thing. Or maybe the editor comes to that understanding, oh, these are the differences. Maybe these are the technical terms that I should start, to get to know more of. So I'm very sure anyone here can, relate, if not in the exact context, but if there are people from publishing, otherwise, I'm sure there are enough incidences where we can, give examples from our personal, professional lives. Oh, this is what happened in the end, and this was what I faced, or this is what the author had to face, etc. But really, the one key thing that we understood was that the relationship is such that it has to be, it's a two-way street. It has to go both ways. And the one thing that we understood mutually last time we spoke was that there is now a trust deficit. That trust deficit you can see overall in society, in my opinion. It's everywhere. The government doesn't trust, say, the RBI. We don't trust the government. We don't trust law. We don't trust judiciary. The judiciary doesn't trust us enough. So there is a trust deficit everywhere, and that's why it's no wonder that whether it's journalism today, both of us have been in that, whether it's publishing, there is a trust deficit any which way that has, seeped in. Why I'm talking about it is because, yes, there are great books, great authors we've worked with. Yes, there are great stories we've worked on. But it's easier to talk about those. It's harder to talk about the things that went wrong, right? So, in that sense, I want to ask you, do you think that there is a trust deficit between author and, between reporters and editors that has, increased significantly? Yes, there's friction always, but do you think that has increased maybe like post 90s, which is what also the second section is going to be about?
See, I would not say it as a trust deficit. I think it's more like there's some kind of anxiety, I think, and it all starts from lack of communication initially. And I think it's more about like one side doesn't know about the other side, and they are not actually aware about the functioning of the how the other side is working. Leads to a lot of apprehensions, and then gradually, I think you can say, I don't know whether you can say trust deficit or not, but I think it's more about like you don't know the other person, you don't know how he or she has to function, and whatever you are doing, you at times you're not able to communicate in a way you should have actually been doing it. Like I can tell you from my example, we were just discussing when about my manuscript. I was very apprehensive about sharing it with some people initially, because you're not very clear okay, how it's going to shape up. And at times one writes in a particular frame of mind. He may not be very clear, but after my experience of being on the other side as a deskey, as have in close association with, I have realized that many a times things are not very clearly written. And the person, whoever is writing, whether it's a reporter or some new author, whatever he writes, he thinks that he is very clear about whatever he has conveyed and everything has been explained very well. On the other hand, the other person who doesn't know him or he, when he reads through it, then he finds there are a lot of ambiguities, or there might be some things which might be conveying something else, which writer doesn't want to convey. And at times there's a
Yeah.
complete
Hmm.
communication gap, or you may say, so once he is rewriting it or redoing it, in the process at times things get actually confused, or the connotation or the theme or the basic idea, I think somehow there's a slight change. This gives a lot of, I think, miscommunication at times, and this actually changes at times the gist of the story, or the main tilt of the story is actually gone somewhere. So I think these things can only be sorted out. One, I think a lot of interaction is needed. It's always better, as I think last time also we were discussing, even in the newspaper, or I don't know much about the publishing houses, but it's very important that whenever a person is joining or taking up a new assignment, some orientation is done. The person should be made aware of the functioning of other departments or other things with which he has or she has to interact. Like whoever is on editing side, I think he should have some idea about, like we were discussing about judiciary or something else, or if somebody is editing a particular book which is a crime thriller or something, I think he should know, or he should be made aware of some basic things which are going to be part of that plot. If it's related to
Hmm.
murder, if it's related to something related to punishment, or something about the judicial functioning, then the person, whoever is editing, he should have some basic idea about those things, like murder and other sections. Threes he should be knowing. So somewhere, because at times if author is not very clear, it's for the desk part to make those things more clear. So I would say trust, more than trust deficit, it's all about interaction, more communication, and trying to empathize with the other person, trying to know what exactly. If I have also seen that if two persons are good friends and one person is working on desk and another is reporter, they come out with better copies. This is what I have
Hmm.
seen with my experience with the younger generations.
Hmm.
So if there's a better interaction, they know each other, there's a better comfort level between both of them, they'll always have good headlines, or the copy will be much clearer. On the other hand, if there's something between two persons, then I think it affects somewhere.
So overall, I relate with the part that there needs to be more communication between both the parties. It hasn't happened. That's why we feel that apprehension, or whatever the term be, lack of trust. What I want to say quickly is that, of course, Aditya, for everyone who's joining in now, he's not only a journalist for 25 years, he's also soon to be a published novelist. He has been working on it for a while, and I hope to see great work coming from you. Second, I want to say that quickly how yes, there is the lack of communication, but I just want to emphasize again on how important it is. Of course, he has expressed why it is, but also it's also very hard because you're working in that ecosystem where already you are going with that apprehension or lack of awareness. Say if I'm the reporter and I don't understand exactly what is it that you do, and if the editor doesn't really empathize, as you said, the word you use, if the editor cannot empathize with the reporter, his life, and the work she or he does, it is harder for any mentor or institution to do that. If there's something really that the individual can to some extent take that responsibility on herself. And if I talk about publishing, it's really the same. Last time also I kept emphasizing how it's really the nature, the fundamentals remain the same, that the author and the book editor, they really need to interact. Yes, when you submit the edits, whatever it be, whether it's track changes or your report, if you see, like, the whole report, the whole document is you communicating with the author, but that never ends there. The author is a real person. You need to address his life, his personality, his likes, his states, know him or her as a person, and then from that bandwidth, have an interaction, have a genuinely sincere, authentic conversation, because otherwise all these relationships will only be short term. And I was reading somewhere is that editors, really what the job we do, the core of our job is communication, or maybe say managing relationships. And I think it goes the same for editors in media houses and newspapers and dailies. I want to go to the next part, which is something that you've already mentioned, is the the difference in the times, things that used to happen before and now. I want to ask you, but I want to quickly share my own example. Is that so? If I started working with the magazine, my first magazine in 2010, 2011, it was it was the best experience, and it was what you were saying, right? When you started, you had your editors sit down with you and show you, take a pen and pencil. So we used to have the same thing. My editor used to sit down with me, and even if it was, say, a 250 word copy and it had to be 240 words, she would not cut it herself. She would make us do it. She would sit down and, tell us what worked well and what did not, and how possibly they could improve it, which is what I think works on any copy, whether it's, marketing copy, whether it's a book, it's a journalistic long form, or even say maybe, multimedia content today. So I want to ask you, tell us a little bit more about the times and how they've changed, the things that you see differently now. What was your experience in the beginning when you started out, and what are the things that you see are changing today?
See, a lot of things have changed, but it's very easy to generally people start criticizing that things have deteriorated and so much has happened and the quality of journalism was very good. But I think the real situation is nowadays youngsters have got equally bigger challenges, and their challenges are quite different from the times we used to face. We used learning computers and other things. Those were the things like those today's generation, they might not even think about it, that learning computers is a big deal for them. But for us, it was the time that when we were thinking that you have to file a story on your computer, or laptops were came much later. I hope I'm not sounding that old as such, but those were the times, and those were the times when you were seeking information. I still remember. In fact, here on, I can see Reena. I have worked with Reena Singh. It's a pleasure seeing her here. I think so. Those were the days. I still remember when we used to file story. We used to go to the library to consult or get some references about the incidents and other things, and we would meet that librarian, and he'll come with a pile of those clippings and other things. Then you are jotting down things and getting the data. And nowadays, all you have to do is just Google on some authentic sites, and you get everything is there within 5 minutes. You can do it. But on the other side, the disadvantage is that you are flooded with the information. Today, it's very difficult to make out what to do with the information and how to compile it and how to make a focused article out of it in 400 words, because you have so much of information, you don't know what to do with it. So I think the basic thing that has changed over the years, that those were the times when you were actually looking for some authentic information. There was a struggle to find out things, and there was a lot of legwork as far as reporting is concerned, or meeting people. You were meeting personally, interacting with the people. You had to go to the places where incidents are happening or some events are happening. Physically, you will go there, you will have a cup of tea, you will chat and interact. And nowadays, I think in terms of physical interaction, it is almost not there now. Lockdown has almost now ended it. Now you are getting most of the information on WhatsApp. You are getting information through social media and other things. So this is the basic change which has gone. It's almost a revolution, I would say. But again, the bottom line remains that how you are going to use this information. I won't say that it has made things much easier for journalists. I think it has equally made the job much tougher for today's youngsters and reporters, because it's not easy to get authentic information. And whatever you want to report or you want to compile information, it's very important. That is, I think that is the basic rule. Even for writing books and otherwise information, you have to get it verified. So now it's a problem of plenty. You don't know how to. I think this is the major change we have witnessed over the period of time. And a lot of, I think, human relations have almost, they have lessened. I mean, there's very little interaction, personally, one-to-one interaction. It's more about, you may be knowing a person for many years, but you might not have met him personally, but you may be knowing too well. I think we also know each other through now.
I was
We
going to
have
say.
over phone call and other
But there was
things.
one more interesting thing you had pointed out, that when you said that when you started, editors and reporters used to work for a couple of, say, weeks together so that both see each other's work. And does that happen less and less today in organizations? Like maybe sort of a probation period for someone who's young, who's starting out.
Yeah, I think no, it's very important that there is a more interaction is required. I think there was some communication. I couldn't hear you properly, but I think what you are trying to say, there
Can
needs
I
to be
just
more interaction.
can I just quickly repeat? Can you hear
Yeah,
me?
sure. Thanks.
Great. So you were saying, you were giving an example how when you started out, There was a time when reporters and editors would in the initial period at least, especially when the reporter is younger or starting out, they would work. The reporter would sit and see the work, the actual edit. Does that happen anymore? I have not seen this happen with young reporters or even young editors in
See,
public.
nowadays actually it's practically it has become very difficult because we are running against time, and there's too much pressure on the reporters as well as on the persons people who are working on the desk. Those were the times when we had to come out with one or two editions maximum, and there was no pressure of filing stories or doing things for internet or web editions and other things. So I think reporter also used to come to the offices in the evening at around 3:30 or 4, and then they'll discuss their stories with their like, cup of tea, and then they'll file their stories, then they'll go to the person whoever is on the desk. Things were comparatively much easier. I think you had a lot of time. Nowadays there's too much pressure. I think it's everywhere. It's like you have to start right from the morning. Some development has taken place, you don't have to give a thorough story, you just have to report, you have to flash the news. This is what
That's
called,
true.
and you
Even
have to
if it's
tweet and other things.
unfortunate. Yeah, that's true for books as well, trade books. Like volume is what has unfortunately become more important than content. But of course, that's what I said. If say as individuals can take a little bit more of the communication role, the advocacy role, maybe it's really on us to to put our foot down and say that, beyond the point, there is only so much content going from us, because I remember that when I worked with publishing, there were hundreds of books coming out from big publishing houses. But we know that publishing houses, they don't have enough editors; they're overworked. So there's only so much quality work then which can come out when editorial is the most key important for any daily or publishing house. So yes, it is unfortunate, and I can relate with it. We wanted to actually get a reporter here today to get us, to show us the other side and what editors and reporters think about each other both way. But if there is someone who's a reporter here today, it would be wonderful to have your comments. I want to move to the next part. I have some like very short questions for you. So I have been on the desk mostly, but I still know that there are some things that are said, some things that are unsaid in terms of the friction between editor and reporter, right? So, and there are some very common refrains, right, that reporters have about editing or editors in specific. So, I want you to hear them out and tell us your most honest reaction, whether you think it's true, and if so, like how much of it is true. So, the first is, uh,
My answer will be as a reporter. I am representing reporters here
that's
in responding to it. Okay.
okay. So, the first,
Yeah.
good stories get dropped because of poor editorial decisions.
Not always.
Tell us more. That's a very diplomatic answer.
No, it's not. Maybe because I have seen both the sides. So a reporter will always think that his story was great if he has done great work. But there might be a lot of things which might be lacking, or there might be a lot of factors. Despite his story being good, it might not get a good display. Obviously, there might be a problem that you might have something more important that day coming up. There might be, if we go into other aspects, there might be reasons that there might be so many advertisements that particular day, and the story was such that you could not hold it back for a day or two, and you had to carry it on that particular day because it might have lost its news value the next day. So you had to carry it, but you couldn't give it proper display because there was no space. So a reporter may not understand that the revenue is also generated from advertisements, and they are to be given proper display and everything. And in any case, editorial has little role in that. So a reporter might think that his story was dropped or it was not carried properly because the person who was deciding or the editorial part, they couldn't understand. But there might be a lot many factors which might be responsible. Maybe the story was not covered properly, there was no proper versions, or maybe it was too controversial, and the reporter couldn't substantiate certain facts. So there could be a lot many factors. So most of the times if a reporter asks, the things are explained to them, but there are these assumptions. One can understand that after working for a particular period of time, maybe 4 or 5 years, I would say for both sides, whether you are a reporter or you're on desk, I think you develop some kind of confidence, at times even overconfidence, that you know a bit more about your beat or about your subject or the copy which you are doing, which may not be actually a very healthy sign, or in the long term, it might actually affect the quality of your work, but it happens on both the sides. So if a reporter is covering a beat for about 4 or 5 years, I think he knows that he knows quite a bit about his work or subject, and he comes out and files his story, and next day it gets dropped. So I think he may think about, he'll say that, yeah, it was because of poor editorial judgment, or the person who was editing it, he couldn't get the gist of my story, or the headline was poor, intro was not done properly, even if he might not have done it in the way it was required to. So I
So
would
I
say,
totally understand what you're saying and where you're coming from. There isn't anything that I would deny, but I would still say that just to, like spice it up, I would say that as an editor for a publishing house, I have had to reject good proposals. Similarly, like when you said, that sometimes it's just not in the hands of the editorial. Yes, that's true. The editor can sometimes only do so much. So we have had to reject, some really good book proposals for whatever reasons. But I still understand, like good stories get dropped. They might be good in someone's perception, but the editor is doing, like a job for, eventually the reader. So editors are not making the decision to sabotage anyone's career. And I think that's where it sometimes comes from, that you don't understand at all. However, our role is just the opposite, to just make sure that the reader understands. Okay, so I'll just quickly move to the second one. Uh, Editors don't really know that particular beat, and that's why they just propose random ideas. So suppose I'm the editor and I say to the reporter, go ahead and do a story on that, and the reporter feels you have no idea.
yeah, I would say 60% chances are there. It might happen. It doesn't happen always, because see, idea can come from anywhere. We always used to say this idea can come from anywhere. It's not that particularly about a reporter or a sub editor. It can come from even from a peon in the office. We have seen at times that somebody might come out with a great story idea. Yes, but it at times it happens that it might not be very practical to do something, but I would say there were some great ideas which were given by the people on the desk also. It's not a
Hmm.
diplomatic answer, but I would say that it's not easy to actually generalize these issues. But yes, it happens at times. I think we discussed last time also. So that is why it's very important that a reporter also has some feel of how desk functions. Maybe I think once, even in the courses of these journalism, mass communication, or otherwise, even during the internship, I think it can be a good idea that reporters are made to work with desk for some time, maybe for a couple of
Hmm.
weeks. And people who are on the desk, they are sent with the reporters for a week or so, how they are covering, how they are meeting people, how it's a struggle at times to even meet your source or an official. You have to waste your entire day, maybe
Yeah.
4 hours, and the person is not ready to give up. But in the evening, when you come, whoever is editor or whoever is asking, he might say, "You have done nothing in the day. What did you do? You just roamed around and you came out with a no story at all." Where the actual thing might be something different. It doesn't happen always, but I think it's very important. So basic thing is that it's very important that from people know what other, how, under what circumstances, under what limitations other person or the other section is working. I think it can make a lot of things much easier and much more understandable. So by that
Yeah, which is
yardstick, I
what
think
we talked
it's
about,
important.
right? Like the basic empathy, just trying to understand where the other person is coming from can help just make our lives much, much easier. One more thing we talked about is that, how we were talking about how today the urge is to get that byline. When you were saying, like when you had started, instead the idea was to get a story. The story was king, the story was content. It didn't matter whether you got your name published, right? Today it's, I have seen the other way around. Like the it is something very unsaid, but the reporter is made to feel that the primary more important thing is to get the byline, to get the name, which really just then maybe has a direct immediate consequence on the quality. So what do you have to say on that?
And I think for this, I would say you cannot actually blame the reporter alone. I think it's somewhere I think because of so much of content and the criteria has I think changed a lot. Because I think today also I think in most of the newspapers also there is some pressure about quantity of the stories, because at times you have to give so many stories even to the reporters. I think they a lot of assessment is being made on the number of stories you are filing every day for online edition and otherwise. So I think if you expect, I think that would be unfair that you expect from a reporter to file 7 to 8 stories in a day and you expect that all those stories will be good quality stories.
Which is actually the expectation today. If you see online, news content, they are expected
Right.
to turn out those many stories. That's actually true.
Exactly. So in somewhere that quality compromise has to be made with the quality, and I think reporters who have seen the earlier phase, they know that they have to make compromise, and the youngsters who are coming, unfortunately, they are not even actually made aware of they just somewhere they just forget, or they are not even told what exactly the quality means, so they get confused with the quantity. They are filing 7 stories, 8 stories, so somewhere at the end of the week or end of the month, that is the criteria for them. Look, I have filed so many stories for tweet, so I have tweeted so many stories. I was the first one to break this development. So somewhere there's no one to tell them, or the criteria has shifted, I would say, because of which the quality has, obviously the writing quality and other things are to be compromised. But I won't say that they are to be blamed for this, because the process or the criteria has changed. So ultimately, it's all about that. See, in a week there were so many bylines for online edition. There were so many bylines for in the paper, and that thing has gone. I think because and even I would say the deterioration has taken even it is also it can be seen from the reader's point of view also, because those times you hardly get those letter to editors which you used to get earlier, appreciating some particular story, like this was a great story we read somewhere in the newspaper. You would hardly find those readers also. So it's not in one particular aspect, it's everywhere, I think, whether it's about report, and everything has been compromised. And I don't know, it's mainly because of I think the pressure of delivering more and meeting the deadlines, and I think also the competition for these online and digital form, which has actually taken toll on the quality. So somewhere you feel that I think that thing has gone,
I
because there
think
was a
what
time
we
when
yeah.
reporter used to come and they will say that they used to come and say that they didn't want to take byline on a particular story, because they don't want to be actually just somebody should be telling that this is what is there in the story to take a byline. But I think those times are gone now. It's just that you want that your name should be seen, and readers are also okay with this.
I so hope there is someone who's a reporter there and wants to just counter us and say that's not true. But anyway, I understand what you're saying and I can relate with it. I think overall what we're saying is that yes, communication is the need of the hour, but also that there has been some systemic or institutional change that so many of us as individuals can only fathom or try to understand. So much of it is not in our control, but that's what I'm saying. Like, let's try and do what we can as individuals. I see the chat box, Aditya. If you can just have a look, there's a lot of comments coming up. So we can open the floor for questions now. So whoever has a question or just a comment, few thoughts, you can switch on your video now and ask us questions. Aditya, if you want to address any question from the chat box, please have a look. Someone's asking you about your novel. If you want, you should definitely tell us.
Uh, okay. Okay, I think Vivek Kumar novel. See, I'm very, I would say I'm a very slow writer in a sense. So it took me around 2.5 years to initially I conceived the idea, and I started writing it. Then after a while, I just dropped. I thought that I may not be able to do it. There was something, the plot was not going ahead. At times there were certain other things which were happening in your life, and you thought that you will give up. So I started. In fact, what I have completed this time, it's my work of my. This is my second idea. First, for first novel, I had written around 25,000 words, And after that, I don't know, I lost track. I thought that it was not going anywhere. I was not finding the plot interesting. So I dropped it there itself. I started with a fresh idea, started working on it, and then it took me around 2 years to complete it. And I'm almost done with the manuscript and everything. But I don't know, you might be knowing better. But I was told my friends and well-wishers that this might not be the right time or the appropriate time to just pitch in, just wait for a while so that after lockdown things get better. So I'm just
Yeah.
holding on to it.
So Divya, I think the main suggestion would be to really to hold on, not submit, but yes, continue to write. If you have any specific suggestion for fiction writers, I think Divya is looking for that sort of a tip.
I may not be as experienced as compared to so many people. This is my first, but what first thing I that you have to be very consistent, and somewhere you have to develop that discipline of writing, which comes with practice. I mean, you can start like when I gave up on my first that idea. After that, I realized that one thing was important, that I used to get up early in the morning at around 5:30 or 6 o'clock. And even if you are not able to write fluently, just write about it. Write anything for about half an hour or 45 minutes or so. And gradually you can work on this, whatever you have written, you can work on that idea, or in during the day, go through it. Just see what you have written. You can, it's much easier to improve on anything you have than not writing anything. I think the mistake or the flaw which I had when I was working on my first manuscript, which remains incomplete, was that whenever I was not able to write something interesting, I used to stop writing. I thought, no, 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 this is getting very boring. I should not go ahead with it. I should write when I have some good idea or some better plot ahead. In the process, I just gave up, because in the process I lost track and maybe continuity was not there. But while writing this particular thing, I proceeded. Even I used to write, and even if I had to rehash everything on the chapter, and I used to write around 800 to 1000 word every day, well, just to in one or two sittings. And then you can, during the day, whenever you get time, you can just go through it. So I think consistency and discipline plays the key role. You may be having better language, you may be having ideas and other things, but if you want to go ahead and complete it, it's important that you remain consistent, write anything, develop your daily routine and work for it. Even half an hour to 1 hour is, I think it's more than enough.
Good afternoon, Aditya.
Hi,
Good after-
Divya.
Hi, good afternoon, Aditya sir, and hi, Priya. So, Aditya sir, I have been at TUI Chandigarh and then TUI Kolkata from 2008 May till 2011 July. So, Anand Sundar sir was my RE in Chandigarh, and late Sumit Sen sir, he was my RE in Kolkata. He is no more here today. So, just a few points that you all
Okay.
were discussing about. Sorry for being late. And like one, I came in late, so whatever I could hear, one was Priya was talking about the nurturing that she has received from her boss when she joined the industry. So likewise for me, I have been quite fortunate, and I don't know if this trend still continues in TUI, but I have been quite fortunate to have been nurtured and to have been handheld like by Anand Sundar sir, Prosenjit Mund, who is the present RE of Bhopal, TUI Bhopal, and Ochinto Roop Ray, who is a present news editor, or he might be senior news editor, sorry, like I don't know his present designation, of TUI Kolkata, and late Sumit Sen, who is no more with us today. So I have been quite lucky in that regard, and that was actually my like learning on the job. So, and again from Guwahati, I'm basically from Guwahati, Assam. So we had, he's presently again no more with TUI. So, and I'm Sunil sir. He is with Manipur at present, and like quite lucky what Priya was talking about. So the discussion took me back to my TUI days, and sir, Aditya sir was talking about understanding or trying to know what the what the other department or what the other section does. So during my TUI Chandigarh, this is a small incident. During my TUI Chandigarh days, I was a fresher at that point of time. I was just a sub editor, and two of us, like me and another person, we used to be on the desk for late night editions that used to go around 2 o'clock if there are many major changes. and there was this guy, I forgot his name, Sanjeev, maybe, yeah, Sanjeev. So he gave me a call from post production. He said that the headline is bleeding. Headline is bleeding, that means the headline words are not has not been fitted into the space, so headline is bleeding. So I
Right.
went and I
Right.
saw, and the person who was responsible for that page, he or she had gone without checking the page, proper final page, without checking the final page at the post production stage. So he asked me what to do,
Yeah.
and without my fault was that, even though I was working in the best interest of TUI image and TUI quality, my like fault was that I didn't call up, or I didn't contact the senior person who was out for a smoke. So I took the decision to stop press, and the press was stopped, and the headline was changed. It was fitted into that slot, and we resent it. But like, yeah, what Aditya sir said, that when a person joins, when I joined TUI Chandigarh, I was taken to the production press and everything. We were shown around, but I didn't know the economical, or maybe I forgot. It crossed my mind, the economical, the financial thing that goes into it. The one plate at that point of time, CCI had just come, 2011. So TUI CCI just come, and like Anand Sundar sir, the next day he called me to his cabin, and he told me, like, I'm taking all the fall, like all the responsibility on my shoulder, but at least please speak to someone. So this is how important it is to know the other department works, or the importance or the relevance of the work of other department. Because for that, I know that the image matters, or the quality or the standard matters, but the economical financial thing that goes into that is enormous, or was enormous at that point of time. One plate, the cost of one plate. And the headline that I'm talking about of the page, it was an inside page, it was not page one. So he said, and again so late in the night, so he said it could have just gone. So that was one. And I don't know, Priya has been talking about someone being a reporter. I have been again quite I've been quite lucky to have been supported and encouraged by Jasprit Nichar. She is the features editor of TY Chandigarh. So I used to report for art and culture bit. I used to cover art and culture bit while in Chandigarh. And during that point of time, again, like the stories that we file is irrespective, because I have done my internship with Hindu also, Hindu Chennai, and I started my journey in Sentinel, Guwahati. After that, I've been with Seven Sisters Post, Guwahati, after TUI. So it depends on the editorial policy of the media house. So what type of stories you file, and the every story will have different story angles. So the people on the desk, they are the gatekeepers. They will decide which story angle needs to be highlighted or suppressed in a story. So when I was with TUI Calcutta, like were told to highlight, or highlight certain aspects of Sikkim stories. So it goes with the editorial policy that TUI follows. So it's not just one story. It depends on the type of story or the angle of the story. Like a news story will have different angles. I don't know if I've been able to explain this properly from my experience. So this is two incidents I wanted to share. And again, when you're talking about giving space, or if sometimes the reporters will say story has been dropped, or my story didn't get that space that it deserved. So first of all, any media house or report, or like newspapers, this run on the revenue generated from ads. So that's the main source of your revenue, come what may. So, once the ads are placed on the page, only then you get the page. Like this is the ads that has been allotted, and this is the space that is left out. So this is for you. This page comes to the desk, goes to the desk, and then the reporters, once they file their stories, you source the stories from the reporters thing. Then you do the page, like you edit and you design the page. So it depends on, yeah, on the on the relationship that the desky enjoys with the reporter, or the rapport that a desky has with the reporter. But again, we generally, I'm talking about my times, like with TUI. So we generally tend to be unbiased, because a reporter also need to go to the same source for story again. So this is again there at the back of our mind, because if we don't, it depends on the editorial policy first of all. But again, we need to see, or we saw at that point of time, that the sources are not do not get angry. because they might say that we have given this story, so the story was dropped or it didn't get time, didn't get the space that he thought or she thought deserved. So just few points that I thought of sharing.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Suchira. Aditya, do you want to share a few thoughts?
Thank you so much. In fact, I came in 2012, but Jasprit Nizar is still there, and it's good to hear about your experience. I think she had, in fact, told we have orientations in TUI. I think in other organizations also this might be there, but this has to be, I think, something which has to go on. It cannot be a 2-day or 3-day process as such. But we do have still there's interaction, but it has to come from both ends. I think every person, whoever is involved, he needs to show willingness to actually learn or willingness to actually get to know about the other aspect also, because nobody can actually push you. So, but it happens in TUI, and I'm sure it must be happening in other organizations as well. But this has to go on,
So
and
we're
this has to
ending in the
continue.
next couple of minutes. So anyone who has a question and has not still asked, I would really invite you to ask any question, share a few thoughts, because we'll be ending in the next few minutes. Although I do have something myself that I wanted to add.
Can I say something?
Yes,
This
who is
is
this?
Reena Singh here, and I worked with Aditya back in the 90s.
Hi, Rina.
Hi.
So good to see you here. In fact, I was interacting. I think you were mute that time. I think it
Yeah.
was such a pleasant surprise to find you here.
No, that's why I logged in. I said I have to speak to Aditya. Okay.
Yeah, and I think Rina has subbed my many of my copies in Delhi Times.
Yes,
I'm sure.
yes. That's the. Yeah. And like Aditya went on to news. I did a lot of features. I've worked in news as well. So, one thing I must add that in newspapers, there's never a dull moment.
Right.
Right? You'll agree with that, I'm sure.
Exactly, Rina.
And we worked with all kind of maverick editors, and it was real good fun. And I'm retired now, and I wouldn't change that trade for anything else.
Yeah, I think you are right. And you should still be in touch and continue. I think it's so good to hear from you after, I think, more than, I would say, almost
20
more than
years.
2 decades. More than 2 decades.
Yes.
Reena, do you want to maybe tell us a bit, maybe some anecdote about the days you guys worked together in the context of things that we've just spoken about?
Well, I can tell you a few funny things. I started my career back in '83. And at that time, with the Times of India, we used to have a trainee journalist scheme. And the good thing was that for the first year, you were sent off to Bombay, to the head office, and you did things in rotation. You went to magazines, you went to newspapers, you did reporting, you did ET, and all kinds of things. So I think that kind of grounding which we had back then is now lacking. So I feel people should now. Everybody seems to be in a hurry. You want to hire a person on the desk or a reporter. You just want to throw them into the field immediately and start extracting revenue out of, or at least you feel that they are now working for their salary. So those training periods have gone in which you learned so much. And that
Exactly.
should really be introduced, I think, again. It gives
And
you
you
a
had
good.
a funny incident to share. We're waiting for that.
Well, yes, I remember an example which was given to us in the training room in Bombay, and which was this Times of India used to run something called public awareness advertising. It came out next day in the newspaper, somewhere on page 3 or 4, as pubic awareness advertising. So it was an example which was given to every batch of trainees which came in for several years after that. And it was one of those, horrifying things. So, but well, those things also happen. And I think we work with deadlines all the time. And you don't have the luxury of what book editors do, go over copy and things. You just don't have that. So you've got to be fully aware and deliver all the time. You kind of learn how to block out sounds and distractions and just deliver. So
Right.
Well said. So I think we
It's
would.
True,
literally
ma'am.
true.
Absolutely true about the deadlines. Crazy deadlines.
Yes, and every day they
Yes,
never
ma'am.
stop.
Yeah, and you had 2 or 3 editions going from one office. So it used to be like for us, it used to be 8 p.m., 11 p.m., and 1 a.m. So 3 editions.
Yes,
What
Nowadays, we
yes,
have
Aditya
five to
said
six
that,
editions.
yeah, that even the number of editions
Yeah,
one individual is handling has also increased.
yeah,
Of course, the pressures have increased undeniably. That's true, I think, for most of us, whether it's trade publishing or journalism. But I think this has been a very, very wonderful, very pleasant experience. I hope everyone here also enjoyed the interview, the conversation. Thank you again, Aditya, for joining us. Thank you, Reena. Thank you, everyone, including Vivek and Murugraj. And I guess this is us wrapping up. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
yes.
Thank you so much, Priya. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone. Thank you, Reena. And thank you. Nice meeting you, Suchira. Thank you,
same
everyone.
here,
It
sir.
has been a pleasure. It has been a pleasure interacting with you all. Thanks. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Thanks, Priya.
Thank you.
Thanks, Vivek, sir.
Yeah, thanks everyone, and thanks Aditya for sharing your experience, and special thanks to Suchira and Reena for their inputs at the end, and for to all the participants for listening patiently to this nice, insightful interview. We will see you tomorrow in our Sunday webinar at 11 a.m. And next Saturday, we will have Murugraj for the interview. And he will be interviewed by Surit Das. So that's all for today. Have a nice evening.